The machine was humming. You have to understand, Studio 6B isn't just a room, it's a finely tuned instrument, a complex box of joy, meticulously calibrated for laughter. Its very walls are soaked in history, a layered residue of every monologue, every snare drum hit from Questlove, every wave of applause that has echoed off them since the 1940s. It has the ghosts of Johnny and Dave and all the giants who sat behind that desk. On that specific Tuesday, the instrument was singing in perfect pitch. The 5 p.m. taping was electric. A hot crowd, the producers called them. Loud, fast, and ready to play. Jimmy Fallon had felt it the moment he burst through the blue curtain, his feet barely touching the floor, as he high-fived the front row, a wave of pure, unadulterated affection washing over him. The monologue had landed, every joke hitting the exact beat. The energy crackled with that specific pre-storm ozone of a great show. He'd done a bit about a new AI toaster that critiques your choice of bread. I put in a bagel, Jimmy riffed, and the toaster just sent me a link to a keto diet plan. I was like, hey man, you work for me. The audience roared. He felt that beautiful rhythm, the give and take between host and house. He was surfing. And then he brought out the big gun. Please welcome our first guest, Jimmy yelled, his voice almost breaking over the thunderous, funky roar of the Roots. He's an Avenger, he's a movie star, he's the literal god of thunder. Please welcome the amazing Chris Hemsworth. The studio exploded. It was a sound more felt than heard, a concussive force of adoration. Chris Hemsworth walked out, a literal demigod in a perfectly tailored suit, exuding an aura of impossible charm and effortless sun-kissed cool. He gave Jimmy a bear hug that lifted him a full inch off the ground, slapped his back, and the audience, somehow, got even louder. The interview was perfect. Chris was born for the couch. He was funny, self-depreciating, and told a hysterical, winding story about his kids being thoroughly, completely unimpressed that he was Thor. It's brutal, mate, brutal, Chris was saying, his Australian accent thick and charming. My son, he had his little friends over, and one of them whispered, Is that Thor? And my son, without even looking up at his iPad, just went, yeah, but I like Iron Man better. Just broke my heart, right in front of me. The audience was putty in his hands. All right, that's great, Jimmy finally said, wiping a genuine tear of laughter from his eye. I know your kids aren't impressed, but we are. But you know, we can't just talk. I know you. You're too competitive. We have to play a game. The flashing lights and chaotic 80s video game fanfare of random word association hit the big screen. The audience roared their approval. Okay, Chris, you know the rules, Jimmy explained, leaning in, the energy crackling between them. I say a word. You have to say the first word that comes to your mind, but it cannot be related. If it's related, you get the buzzer, and I get the point. Simple, right? You ready? Chris cracked his knuckles, a grin splitting his face. Mate, I was born ready. Let's go. Bring it. Okay, your first word is water. Chris paused, thinking hard, the cogs visibly turning. Ocean. A loud, obnoxious buzzer sound filled the studio, making him jump. No, Jimmy screamed, laughing. Too related. Ocean is full of water. That's the most related thing you could possibly say. What? That's ridiculous, Chris argued, playing perfectly to the crowd. An ocean is salt and fish and unimaginable terror. Very different. The audience was loving it. Okay, fine, new word, Jimmy said, trying to regain control. Apple. Fruit? Buzzer. No, come on, that's the category. That's like saying dog and animal. This game is rigged, Chris yelled, throwing his hands up in mock disgust. It's a stitch-up. I knew it. I'm calling my agent. Okay, one more. This is an easy one, Jimmy said, a sly grin on his face. Hammer. Chris, without a fraction of a second's hesitation, said, Thor. Buzzer! 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 No! That's you! That's the most related word in the entire universe. You are terrible at this. I am not. It's an iconic association. That's different from related. Okay, last one, Jimmy gasped, trying to breathe. America. Chris's eyes lit up. Captain, Buzzer! 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 No, that's the other Chris. That's Chris Evans. You can't even get your own universe right. The studio was a glorious riot. The energy was at its absolute peak. It was fast, loud, silly, and incredibly fun. This was The Tonight Show operating at 10,000 RPMs. The band was vamping, the audience was stomping, everyone was united in this shared, harmless hysteria. And then, yep, it was not a microphone pop. It was not feedback. It was a sharp, high-pitched, anxious sound, an unmistakably organic bark. The sound was so alien, so wrong for the controlled, sterilized, soundproofed environment of Studio 6B that everyone froze. The Roots stopped playing mid-riff. Tariq, about to make a joke, snapped his mouth shut. The audience's laughter died in a sudden confused, cascading wave. The silence that rushed in was deafening, amplified by the sudden absence of noise. Jimmy, ever the professional, blinked. His host mode kicked in, his brain scrambling for the joke, for the out. Whoa! Questlove, is that you? Did you finally bring that puppy I asked for? Where is he? The audience tittered nervously. They knew this wasn't part of the show. Louder this time, more insistent. Jimmy's smile faltered. His eyes darted around the studio. This wasn't a bit. This was real. Gavin? He muttered to his producer in his earpiece. What is that? I don't know, Jim. It's tense. A sharp whisper in his ear. Security is looking. 6th row. I think it's a dog, Jim. A real dog. Crap. The cameras, unsure where to go, panned clumsily into the crowd. The spotlights, usually so precise, began to search, casting nervous circles. And then they found him. 6th row, center aisle. A man, David, perhaps in his late 40s. He was not looking at the stage. He was looking down, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated shame. His hands were fumbling with the harness of a beautiful golden retriever, a service animal, who was now standing, agitated, in the aisle. The dog was staring intently at the stage. "Oh no," David was whispering, audible on a nearby audience mic as the sound engineer desperately tried to find the source. "Buddy, no, down, buddy. I'm so sorry, down, please, down." The dog, Buddy, wasn't listening. He was captivated, his tail wagging, whining, his entire focus locked, laser-like on the stage. The audience was silent. This was no longer funny. This was awkward. This was a man being mortified on national television. A cameraman, a 20-year veteran named Sal, zoomed in, his hands steady but his brow furrowed. He'd seen everything, but this was new. "Jimmy, we gotta go to break," Gavin said in his ear, his voice sharp and decisive. "Let security handle it. This is killing the segment. It's dead. Let's go. Toss to commercial in 3, 2. Jimmy looked at David's face. He saw the panic. He saw the humiliation. He saw the beads of sweat on his man's forehead. And he saw the dog, who wasn't being aggressive, but excited? "No," Jimmy said, not to his producer, but to the universe.
He dropped his random word cards on the desk. They scattered, white and insignificant, across the floor. "Hey, it's okay," Jimmy called out, his voice now gentle, the game show host completely gone. The audience turned, relieved, as Jimmy took control in a new way. "It's all right, man. He's a good boy. What's his name?" David looked up, blinded by the spotlight, his head turning toward Jimmy's voice, but his eyes were not focused. His name is Buddy," David said, his voice trembling. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Fallon. He never does this. He's a professional. We should go. I'm so sorry to ruin the show." He started fumbling, trying to gather the harness to stand. No, 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 Jimmy said, holding up his hands, a gesture of absolute sincerity. You are not going anywhere. You're not ruining anything. Don't worry about it. We love dogs here. Right, everybody? The audience, given permission, applauded warmly. Jimmy stepped off the stage platform. The cameras scrambled to follow. Jim, don't, Gavin pleaded in his ear. We're losing the block. The segment is dead. Just toss to commercial. Let us handle it. Jimmy ignored him. He walked down the aisle and crouched a few feet away from the dog so as not to startle him. Hey, buddy, what's up, man? You like the show? You like games? You thought my jokes were rough? A few people laughed, the tension easing. Buddy let out another soft woof, but this time he was straining at the leash, his nose pointed directly at Chris Hemsworth. Chris, who had been standing silently on stage watching this all unfold, took a half step back, a look of amused confusion on his face. I think, David said, his voice shaking, I think he recognizes his voice. This stopped Jimmy. He looked from the dog to David. He recognizes his voice? What do you mean? David took a deep, shuddering breath. The camera was tight on his face now. Mr. Fallon, I'm blind. I lost my sight 3 years ago. Diabetic retinopathy. It came on fast. Took about 6 months. Complete darkness. The studio let out a collective soft gasp, the sound of 300 people understanding all at once. Buddy here, he's my eyes. He's my world. And when you're in the dark, sound is everything. It's all you have. It's the color, it's the shape, it's the light. Jimmy was completely still. He was no longer a host. He was a witness. This was no longer a TV show. This was a confessional. And in the beginning, it was hard, David said, his voice thick with an emotion that was still raw, still close to the surface. It was very dark. I was depressed. I lost my job. I couldn't leave the house. I didn't want to. And the only thing I did was listen. I listened to television, with audio description. It was my only window. He turned his head toward the stage, toward where he knew the guests were. And I listened to a lot of movies. My daughter, she made me listen to all the Marvel movies. She said I needed a hero over and over. And Mr. Hemsworth's voice. On stage, Chris Hemsworth froze. His movie star smile, the one that sold billions of dollars in tickets, was gone. It was replaced by something raw, vulnerable, and intensely human. He was processing. It's the voice of a hero. That's what my daughter told me. She'd say, "Dad, listen. That's Thor. That's the sound of someone good, the sound of someone strong." And when I was in that dark place, that voice, it was like a lighthouse. It sounded like what strength was supposed to sound like. He reached down to pet Buddy, who was now whining softly, licking his hand. And Buddy knows, David sobbed. He learned. When I'd get sad, my daughter would put the movie on, and Buddy, he learned that voice meant I was about to feel better. He hears him. He hears the hero. I'm so sorry, he's just excited. The studio was broken. A woman in the front row was openly weeping. Questlove, on his drum throne, had his hand over his mouth. The cameraman, Sal, zoomed in on David's hand on Buddy's head and had to wipe his own eye with his free hand. Jimmy was speechless. He was on his knees in the aisle, looking at this man. He looked up at Chris on the stage, his eyes saying, "This is real. This is all you." Chris Hemsworth was no longer the demigod. He was just a man. His face was wrecked with emotion. He looked at Jimmy, then at David, then at the dog. He was processing. The weight of his own voice, of his own work, of a line reading he did in a sound booth in Atlanta years ago was crashing down on him in a way he could never have anticipated. In Jimmy's earpiece, Gavin was silent. The show was gone. The script was confetti. There was only this moment. Chris made a decision. He didn't ask. He didn't wait for a cue. He walked off the stage, past Jimmy's desk, and down the aisle steps. He moved with that impossible grace, and the entire studio held its breath. He stopped in front of David and Buddy. Buddy, the dog, went still. He sniffed. His tail began to wag, slowly at first, then furiously. He seemed to understand. He knew that smell. He knew that smell. Chris Hemsworth knelt. On the floor of Studio 6B, in his $1,000 suit, he got down on one knee so he was at eye level with the dog and with the man. "Buddy."
"Buddy," Chris said. His voice was a low, gentle rumble. The dog whined, ecstatic, and lunged forward, licking his face. "Hey, mate. Hey, boy. It's okay." Chris laughed, a wet, choked laugh, letting the dog nuzzle his hand, his face, not caring about the suit or the cameras. David was frozen. He was shaking, his hands gripping his knees. He could hear, he could smell, but he could not see. He knew, but he could not believe. "David," Chris said, his voice soft, normal, his Australian accent clear. David flinched. Yes, sir?" Chris gently took David's hand, the one that wasn't on the harness. "David, my name is Chris. I'm just a man. But I am so moved by your story. I'm speechless." David let out a sob. I know. I can't believe. I'm so sorry." "Don't you be sorry," Chris said, his voice thick. "You have a very, very good boy here, a true guardian. He's the best," David whispered. "And you?" Chris said, his voice dropping. It changed, it deepened, taking on that familiar, resonant Asgardian quality, that sound of heroism. "David," he said, and the studio felt the shift. "It is an honor to meet you, a true warrior." David's face it was undescribable. It was the face of a man hearing the voice of God. It was pure, unadulterated, impossible joy. I am no warrior, sir," David stammered, tears flooding. "You are," Chris insisted, his voice still in that Thor rumble, but now filled with a genuine, powerful empathy. "You fight on. You stay strong. For your daughter, for Buddy. That is what a hero does." He squeezed the man's hand. I am just a man in a silly costume," Chris said, his voice breaking. You are the real thing. Thank you. Thank you for listening." Chris stood up. The studio was gone. People were openly crying. Jimmy was still kneeling, wiping his eyes, making no attempt to hide it. Chris walked back to the stage, but the game was over. The energy was transformed. He sat, not as a guest, but as a man who had just been fundamentally changed. Jimmy walked slowly back to his desk. He looked at the scattered cards from the game. They looked stupid, insignificant. He sat down. He looked at the camera.
"Well," he said, his voice thick, I think we're done playing games for tonight." The audience let out a soft, warm, understanding laugh. "David, you and Buddy are welcome here anytime. Anytime. You've got tickets for life. Thank you for coming." David, still stunned, just nodded, clutching his dog, who was now resting peacefully at his feet. Jimmy turned to Chris. "Chris, I don't know what to say. That was..." Chris just shook his head, still processing. He's the hero, man. He really is. Yeah, he is." Jimmy looked at the prompter. It was blank. Gavin, in his ear, was silent. The show was shattered. "You know, we had a whole other bit planned. We had a musical guest. We had a whole nother sketch. But I don't think it matters. I don't think anything can follow that." He turned to the main camera. I think that's our show for tonight. Sometimes life is more important than the script. This was one of those times." He looked at David in the audience. He looked at Chris on the couch. "Thank you, Chris Hemsworth. Thank you, David. Thank you, Buddy." He paused, a small smile on his face. "And thank you, Thor, for reminding us what a hero sounds like. Good night, everybody." The credits rolled, but the audience didn't cheer. They rose as one and gave David a standing ovation, a wave of love and respect for a man they didn't know, but now they understood. As they clapped, Chris Hemsworth, the movie star, stood on the stage clapping for David. That night, the laughter stopped, but in the silence, something far more powerful was heard, the sound of real strength. What the cameras didn't see was what happened next. As the audience filed out, still buzzing, still wiping their eyes, Jimmy and Chris didn't go to their dressing rooms. They walked back down the steps together. They found David and his daughter, who had been sitting quietly beside him the whole time, letting him have his moment. They spent the next 20 minutes in the aisle, not as a host and a movie star, but as two men. Chris sat on the armrest of the seat in front of David, leaning in, talking about his own kids, about how Thor was just a job, but Dad was his real title. He made David laugh, a real, genuine laugh. Jimmy, meanwhile, was getting Buddy to give him his paw, making the daughter giggle. Jimmy's producer, Gavin, the man who had been screaming in his ear to cut to commercial, came down to the floor. His own eyes were red. He just put a hand on David's shoulder and said, "Sir, we have a car for you. Whenever you're ready. No rush." Chris took a pen from his pocket and grabbed a cue card from Jimmy's scattered pile. He didn't sign a glossy 8x10. He scribbled something on the back. "David," he said, "this is my personal cell. I don't know. But if you're ever having a dark day and you need, to hear a hero, you call me. I'll answer." That was the moment. That was the part no one saw. The show was over. The humanity wasn't. That night a man came to a comedy show seeking a distraction and left being seen by his hero. And a hero who came to promote a movie was reminded of what real strength actually sounds like.